Since 2025 is officially over now, it is high time that I get to my 2025 reading wrap up. So this is going to be just a quick reading wrap up of every single book that I read. Altogether, I read 63 books in 2025, which is pretty decent if you ask me. Last year, I think I read like 101 or something like that, but this year I kind of tried to focus more on quality than quantity. And then also I allowed myself to get more into some of my other hobbies. So I did spend less time reading and more time gaming, drawing, hiking, stuff like that. But 63 is nothing to scoff at. I am actually really proud of that number. My goal was 52 and we definitely surpassed that. So starting off January, the first book that I read was Deadly When Disturbed by D.M. Barr. This one was an ARC that I was sent, and it was a thriller that was kind of like an unreliable narrator situation, and I ended up rating it 4 stars. I remember really loving all of the twists and turns in it. Next, I listened to Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. This one was alright. It was kind of lackluster to me. I definitely found that the writing was a bit boring at times for a thriller, and it just didn't really keep me on the edge of my seat, so I ended up rating it 3 stars. Then I listened to Patrick Stewart's memoir, Making It So, and I absolutely loved this one. I do not rate memoirs, but it was very interesting, and if you are at all into Star Trek, X-Men, anything that had Sir Patrick Stewart in it, I feel like you're gonna love this memoir. It's basically him telling his entire life story from when he was a child up until when he wrote the book, and it's very interesting. His childhood is nothing like I expected, and he's a lot less prim and proper than I think I had always thought that he was. Then I listened to the audiobook I'll Come to You by Rebecca Kaufman. This is the first ARC that I got in the form of an audiobook, and unfortunately I did not really like it. It was in no way, shape, or form the narrator's fault. It was just the writing. It wasn't really for me. It was a slice of life, but not much happened, and it's not one that I think I'd recommend or go back and read ever again. I think I rated this one like 2 stars, which is not that great. I very rarely rate something that low. It just was not very good. Then the last thing I read in January was Billy Summers by Stephen King, and this one was definitely 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. It is more of like a thriller slash action-packed book, not a horror, which I think this was my first one like that by Stephen King, and I liked it just as much as his horrors. It is a chunky book, but I read it very quickly, and it is definitely one I recommend if you yourself have never read Stephen King, or maybe you're not into horror but you've always wanted to try Stephen King. This would be a perfect book to start with. It does have some Easter eggs kind of hidden in there that hints at some of his other works, but you don't have to have read any of other Stephen King's books to understand anything that's going on in this book. Next was February, and I started off February with a bang and read Tender is the Flesh. This book was vile and disgusting and grotesque, the worst thing you could imagine. It was nasty, but 5 stars. It did exactly what it intended, and it's definitely worth the hype, but if you're queasy or have a weak stomach or don't like gore, I don't recommend this one at all. This is only for horror lovers, I think. I do not have this book in my possession anymore because I did put it into a little free library. The only reason being that I did not want to look at it. I didn't want it on my shelf. I didn't want it in my house. It's just that gross. 5 stars. I will never forget this book, but I also never ever ever want to see it ever again. Then I went on a little bit of a lighter note and read volumes 6 and 7 of Lore Olympus. I love this series so much. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but it's one that I hold near and dear to my heart. I've always loved Greek mythology, and the colors and style kind of reminds me of like the Disney Hercules Greek gods, but like obviously this is more geared towards adults. There is some mature themes in it and stuff, but these were both 5 stars, and I cannot wait to continue the series. There are actually more coming out this year and more that came out last year that I didn't know about, so I'm gonna have to get on that for sure. Then I read Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This one I borrowed from someone. I did really enjoy this one as a one-time read. It was a super quick read. I remember it being very short, but it's definitely not one I think I'd go back to time and time again. It was good, just not my favorite like quick fantasy that I'd ever read. Definitely an interesting concept though. I would love to have a giant bird that I can ride around and have a bond with. That would be super cool. Then I read Butcher and Blackbird and Leather and Lark. I loved these so much. This is when I realized that dark romance is definitely my kind of thing. Not something I knew about myself until I picked up Butcher and Blackbird. I will say that these books have a lot of content warnings in them. I I think there's cannibalism in it at some point, so if you don't like ickiness like that, skip them for sure, but if you like dark romance, you definitely need to give these ones a try. They're also funny. Like, they're not disgusting. It's dark and gory, but there's humor to it as well, so it's not something that's gonna haunt your dreams. Butcher and Blackbird was definitely 5 stars. I do believe I rated Leather and Lark 4 stars. I just really preferred the characters of Butcher and Blackbird. Leather and Lark characters were mid. Maybe I did rate it 5 stars. Looking back at it now, it's definitely a 4 star though. Butcher and Blackbird was where it was at. Then I listened to Derek Whibley's memoir, Walking Disaster. Derek Whibley is the lead singer, or former lead singer, of the band Sum 41. This one was super interesting. I love that Derek is from Canada. He's actually from Ontario, so a lot of the places that he talked about growing up near and visiting and stuff, I've been there and know exactly what he's talking about, so that was a really fun aspect of it. It was also narrated by him, and he has a super unique and interesting voice, so that added a little something to it. Then I listened to Untamed by Glennon Doyle. This one was hard because it was kind of a memoir and then also somewhat of a self-help book. I didn't rate it, or at least I don't remember rating it. It definitely was not my favorite thing that I've ever read. I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't even remember most of it, so that kind of tells you something. Then I listened to John Stamos's autobiography, If You Would Have Told Me. This one I do remember. John Stamos played one of my favorite characters in Full House, Uncle Jesse, and he has definitely had a very interesting life and has experienced some things that I was not expecting from him. And then to end off February, I did reread Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I try to reread this every single year, and 2025 was no different. 5 stars, obviously. Now we are into March, and I started off March with another arc, and that was Jane Austen's Garden by Molly Williams. This was just a fun little nonfiction book about different things to do with Pride and Prejudice and Jane Austen. It had like ways to do different crafts inside of it. There was information on flowers and plants that were mentioned in some of Jane Austen's books. Overall, just a fun time for anyone who's a Jane Austen fan. Then I finally finished the collection of Japanese death poems that I had been reading for a few months. I actually loved this collection far more than I thought it was going to. It has a lot of nature poetry throughout it, which I love, and then also some that's kind of existential but calming in a way. Definitely a 5-star collection, and I will be going back to it again and again in the future. Then I listened to Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. This was an interesting memoir. I will say I have not seen that many things with Matthew McConaughey in it, so I didn't know some of the things he was referencing as far as like movies go, but it did solidify the fact that I do need to watch Dallas Buyers Club eventually, hopefully. There was another one that I have to watch with him in it. It's like something to do with space, Interstellar or something like that. He talked about that one quite a bit, and I definitely need to get into that one as well. Anyway, very interesting memoir, and it was narrated by him as well, and he has a very unique voice, so if you get anything from this video, it's that you should definitely look into listening to memoirs narrated by the author, because that just adds a whole nother layer to the memoir. Then I read Where Hope Comes From by Nikita Gill. I do believe I read this in one sitting, but just because it was that good. I loved this poetry so much. Once again, nature poetry, it's the best. And it also had little pieces of art throughout it as well that kind of went with the collection, and I really liked that touch to it. Poetry plus art. Yes, please. I do believe I rated that one 5 stars. Next, I read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. This was arguably my favorite first-time read-through of a book in 2025. I had never read Handmaid's Tale. I'd never seen the show either, so I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. And my goodness, is this a masterpiece. Margaret Atwood was definitely ahead of her time. It's amazing. This book honestly feels like something that could have been written last year, not something that was written decades ago. If you've never read The Handmaid's Tale, I highly recommend giving it a try at least. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea. There are some graphic things in it, but it is worth the hype that it gets. I just want to say that. Then I read Where Darkness Blooms by Andrea Hanna. I think I rated this one 2 stars. It wasn't great. It sounded like it was going to be interesting. It was described as a spooky town where like sunflowers can hear what people are saying and are kind of sentient beings. That's the vibe I got from the synopsis anyway. And it was multiple perspectives, very scatterbrained, not written the greatest. So I did end up popping this one into a little free library, and hopefully somebody picks it up who will enjoy it more than I did. It was an interesting concept, but the execution was just not there. Then I borrowed this book from my partner called One Cup at a Time. This is an adorable collection of like little comics and stories about cute little animals that are all friends. It's absolutely adorable, and this one has my favorite character on it, which is Kiwi. He's a little kiwi bird, and he's just a funny little guy. Oh my goodness. Definitely recommend this one if you're into cute little comics. Then I listened to the nonfiction novel Murder on the Inside. This is about the riot that happened at the Kingston Pen, and I did not know much about this riot. I don't even know if I knew there had been a riot at the Kingston Penitentiary. But yeah, there were deaths and everything too. I did not know that. And this book was very insightful. The way it was written was super interesting because the author did not take sides, if that makes sense. She wasn't biased in her writing at all. She interviewed people from both sides of the riot. There was not much stuff that was like opinion based in this book, which made it very interesting. It was nice to kind of get all of the facts and not just one side of the story. If you're into true crime or anything like that, definitely give this one a go. Then I got an arc called Always the Quiet Ones. This was a super fast-paced thriller, very fun to read, and once again was kind of an unreliable narrator situation, which I always love, so obviously it was like 5 stars. Then I listened to the book The Body Keeps the Score. This is kind of self-help, but more just information about anxiety and PTSD and how it can actually affect your physical being as well as your mental well-being. This one was recommended to me by a therapist, and I'm so glad that she recommended it because it definitely changed my perspective on different things in life and kind of just letting things go and how it is so important not to let stress dictate your life. And then the last thing I read in March after that one felt very fitting, and that was Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Jomny Sun. This is a cute little piece that is kind of existential, but definitely in a calming way. I've definitely talked about it many times before. It's just cute little simple drawings, but some of it is so meaningful. There are some pages that have paragraphs on them, such as this one, and the things that they are saying can get very deep, but in a cute kind of way. This is definitely a feel-good graphic novel that I would recommend to absolutely everyone. This is 5 stars. I think I've read it like 5 times now, and I will always go back to it because it is just that good. Now we are into April, and I started off April with a 5-star read, Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins. I cannot wait until this movie comes out later this year. Oh my goodness. Honestly, anything that Suzanne Collins writes at this point is 5 stars to me. I'd read her grocery list. Then I read Scythe and Sparrow by Bryn Weaver. This is the 3rd and final installment of the Butcher and Blackbird trilogy. I did really like this one, but I did not like the characters as much as the first or the second one. I think I rated it 4 stars. Looking back at it, it might be more 3 stars. There were just parts of it that were kind of cringy to me. Still a good time, don't get me wrong, and I did really enjoy the ending. Also, it kind of brings all 3 books together in a way that I won't say. Just the couple was not my favorite. That's kind of my main complaint about this one. Then I listened to the audiobook How to Piss Off Men. This was a very quick listen. I think it was like 2 hours max, and it was an overall good time. It's not one that I'd like listen to again and again, but it did make me laugh, and that's what counts. I think I rated this one a solid 3 stars. And then the last thing I read in April took me a little bit to read because it was so dark. I had to kind of take breaks, and that was My Dark Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. I will never forget this book. It was very intense and disturbing, and not for everybody. I for sure want to stress that. Because of the disturbing content, it is about a teacher who grooms one of his teenage students, but is from her perspective and is full of icky situations that I would not wish upon any teenage girl ever. And I think the scariest part about this book is that it is so realistic. But all of that to say, it is also 5 stars. Then we have the month of May. This was May for me. Just Jane Eyre. That's the only thing I read in May, was this albeit stunning edition of Jane Eyre. I think it was illustrated by Ruben Toledo. I believe that's his name. Yes, Ruben Toledo. He does beautiful, beautiful illustrations for classic novels, and I did really enjoy this book. It was 4 stars. The only thing I did not like about it was like the last 100 to 200 pages. I found it definitely could have been a little bit shorter, but leading up to that, it was amazing, and I loved it so freaking much. Then I started off June with a 5-star read, and that was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Oh my goodness, was this such a good book. This is another one that I have not forgotten about and will never forget about. I also do not want to describe the plot because I'm not here to spoil it for anybody, and I think it's one that you should kind of go into knowing very little about. I also must say it did make me cry at one point, and I'm not normally a crier when it comes to books, but this one, wow, it really packed a punch. Then I read this graphic novel collection called Witchblood, and I really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, it kind of left off on a bit of a cliffhanger, and it doesn't look like it's going to be completed anytime soon. But from what I've read so far, 4 stars. It was pretty solid. I think the only thing that made it 4 stars and not 5 stars that it was a little bit choppy at times. I think there could have been a bit more flow throughout it. Then I got sent an arc by Lisa Jewell called Don't Let Him In, and I loved this thriller. It was so good. 5 stars. This was multiple perspectives, which is not normally my favorite, but the way this book did it was perfect. No complaints from me. Then I read Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona. This one was also multiple perspectives, and I do have complaints about it. There was just one perspective in particular that I did not find necessary, or I don't know, it just ripped me out of the story a few times, so I ended up rating this one 4 stars simply because of that. But other than that, very high stakes, suspenseful read, and it's very short and quick. So if you're into short, quick thrillers, highly recommend this one. Then the last thing I read in June was We Had to Remove This Post by, okay, I always struggle with this last name, Hannah Bravowitz. I think I'm saying that correctly. Once again, a very short read, and this one was 4 stars. I got a little lost somewhere in the middle, but the end was just wow. That's all I can say. You'd have to read it to get it. Then for July, I started off by reading Horrid. I loved this book, 5 stars, and I loved it so much that I am lending it to a friend right now and hoping that they love it just as much as I did. If you like the cover, you'll probably like the book. It's safe to judge it on this one. Then I read Canadian Smoke. This one was sent to me as an ARC, and it was not really my favorite read. I rated this one 2 stars. It was action-y, but it felt more like it should have been a movie and less like a book. Then I read Junji Ito's memoir Uncanny. I loved this one. I do not rate memoirs, once again, but if I did rate them, this one would have been 5 stars. Jump scare. This is basically just how Junji Ito got into horror manga, and he writes so well. If you're into Junji Ito or horror manga, you have to read this. Then I started off August by reading Graveyard Shift by Emil Rio. This one gets a lot of hate, but I rated it 5 stars. I really loved it. Once again, multiple perspectives, but done right, and it's kind of the whole point of this book. I'm not going to say why, you'd have to read it yourself, but a lot of people don't like it. I think it has like an average rating of less than 3 stars, which is really not great. I guess I saw something in this book that most people didn't. I really enjoyed it. It is a horror, but not gory. Maybe that's why people didn't like it. I don't know, but I really enjoyed it personally. Then I started the Twisted series. So in August, I actually read the first, second, and third one, Twisted Love, Twisted Games, and Twisted Hate. I did donate Twisted Games and Twisted Hate because they weren't my favorite. Now that I've sat with it, I actually hated Twisted Hate. I hated the main characters, and the third act conflict was a deal breaker for me, and that's all I'll say about that. But the first one was great. Now we are into September, and to start off September, I finished off the Twisted series by reading Twisted Lies. This one I also really liked, and that's why I kept it. So it's a little weird that I have the first and fourth books and not the second and third, but they just weren't that good, and these can technically stand alone, so on my shelf they do. Then I listened to Unmasked by Paul Holes. This one was a true crime memoir that was very interesting. It's about Paul who solves cold cases, and if you're into true crime, I highly recommend this one. It is definitely worth checking out. Then I read The Return by Rachel Harrison, and I loved this one. It was the perfect type of horror to me. It was like a paranormal horror where something weird is going on and the main character is noticing it, but everybody else is like, girl, you're crazy, but she's not. 5 stars. Loved it. Then I read the arc for Mother of God by Sarah Peters. Also 5 stars. Definitely very weird though. So I don't think everybody would like it. It's kind of written like poetry in a way, and I didn't know what was going on half the time, but then at the end it all made sense, and that book was weird, but in a good way. Then I read The Deading, and this book was weird and not in a good way. 2 stars. It was just very scatterbrained, and it felt like the author had too many ideas just for one story. I don't know. It started off amazing and I thought it was going to be so good, but quickly went downhill. Then for October, I started off with a graphic novel / comic compilation, I think, and it is The Addams Family and Evolution. It's just a bind up of all of the original Addams Family comics, and I absolutely loved it. 5 stars. Then I read Ghost Camera by Darcy Coates. This is a bind up of horror short stories, and a few of them, including the one titled Ghost Camera, were 5 stars. There were just a few that definitely weren't, so I averaged it out to be 4 stars, but definitely a good time. Then I read The Grip of It by Jack Jemp, which is also a horror, and I also rated 4 stars. It was a kind of paranormal haunted house situation where once again the main characters notice something's going on but nobody else takes their word for it or will tell them what's going on. Very interesting. I just feel like it could have had a little bit more to it, and the chapters were too short. It was a dual perspective and some chapters were only like 2 pages, which really took me out of the story a lot. Then I finally read The Mist by Stephen King, and this one was absolutely 5 stars. It was so freaking good. I knew nothing about The Mist going into it, and I kind of thought I knew what was gonna happen. I definitely did not. I knew nothing of this book. Very good though, and very short. So another good one to start with if you've never read King before. Then we have November. I read a lot of graphic novels in November, starting off with Third Shift Society. This one is kind of a YA graphic novel bind up. I do believe there is a second one, potentially a third one, but it started off as webtoons and it's pretty good. I feel like it could have been a little bit more fleshed out, but it was a solid 4 stars. Then I reread Fangs by Sarah Anderson. This one is always 5 stars, always will be. Such a fun time and one that everyone should read. Just saying. After that, I read Ally by Junji Ito, and I loved this collection. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite collections by Junji Ito. I actually loved every single story in this bind up. All of them were 5 stars, and one of them was even sad and almost made me cry, which is crazy for a Junji Ito. I was not expecting that at all. Then I reread Cryptid Club by Sarah Anderson, another cute little comic bind up, also 5 stars. Then I read a dark romance arc called Love Me Stalk Me by Laura Bishop, and I loved this one as well, so it was also 5 stars. Definitely cringy and something that if it happened in real life I would change my name and move to a different planet, but written in a book it was good. It was very good. Stalkery kind of romance. Then I read Model Home by Rivers Solomon. This one unfortunately was not 5 stars. It was 3 stars and I ended up putting it into a little free library. I really hope that someone is going to pick this up and really love it because it was clever and it deserves to be loved, but it was a literary horror and just not my vibe, unfortunately. But I definitely understand what the author was going for and appreciate it. It just wasn't for me. Now we are finally into December, and I started off December by finishing this collection of poetry by Mary Oliver called Devotions. I had been reading this one for literal months, but it was 5 stars, and I'm so glad I spent so much time on it because I loved it so much and it really deserved to be cherished as I read it. Then I read The Teller of Small Fortunes. This one I borrowed from someone and I rated it 3 stars. It was a very cozy, cute, found family fantasy, a very fun time, and I definitely recommend it if you are into cozy fantasies. Then I read an arc called Meat Bees. This one was a very well written horror, and it looks nasty, and it was kind of nasty, but not as nasty as you'd think it would be, if that makes sense. But solid 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one, and if this author ever writes any more horror, I will be jumping on that for sure. Then I listened to Sociopath by Patrick Gagney. Once again, it's a memoir, so I didn't rate it, but it was very disturbing at times. I did learn a lot about sociopathy, but I also read some things about it that I wish I hadn't. So if this sounds interesting to you, definitely check the content warnings before you go into it. I wish I had. And then the last thing I read in 2025, and arguably one of the best books that I read in 2025, was Wild by Cheryl Strayed. I loved this book so much. Very solid memoir. I really love nature, so a book about a woman wandering through nature to find herself, sign me up. Obviously that wouldn't be everybody's favorite, but I was really into it. But anyway, that was it. That was what I read in 2025. If you have actually stuck around for this long, thank you so much for watching. I hope you had an amazing year of reading for 2025 as well. Fingers crossed that 2026 is even better for everybody. How amazing would it be if every single book you read in a year was 5 stars? I mean, I guess if you just read one book that was 5 stars and just stopped there. Anyway, I digress. I'm gonna leave this here. I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy reading.